Hey there, it's Noelle. How are you doing this week? I hope you're doing well. I wanted to remind you before I get started that we also have another podcast. We have two podcasts, the Directors Club, and we also have the Early Education Teachers Lounge podcast. Have you listened to that yet? That is a podcast that we developed. There's a link in the show notes, but you can find it on the same exact platform that you're at, called the Early Education Teachers Lounge. And yeah, I do have a link in there. I was just checking to see if I had a link in there. But we have that. And so we've developed, how we develop the content is from my center and all of yours. What happens is I take the goal list that the director does for the year for each teacher, and we start developing this podcast topics and training topics from that. And then I jump on office hours calls with people. And they talk about, I'm struggling with this in the classroom, struggling with this in the classroom. And every time they're telling me, I'm jotting it down. I'm like, oh, that's a good one. What are some of the topics we have in there? One of my favorites is like to add more mindfulness into the classroom, breaks and calming times. And we tell our teachers sometimes breathing exercises. And sometimes they're not consistent with it and they can't follow it. There's a podcast called The Mindful Classroom. That's one of them. What's another one? I'm like looking here. Oh, managing toddler transitions is another one that we have that I think is a great one. Stress relief toolkit. So we have mindset, well-being, all those things for your teachers. Burnout, we talk about. One of them I love is called The Power of in the Pause. That was put out on April 5th. It's a 17-minute podcast, so super quick. And so this is a podcast that you could use for all the teachers. And what this one was, do you ever have a teacher that just blurts things out and you're like, oh, like they're not saying things that are awful, but you're like, oh, you should have just taken a second before you blurted that out, or your tone. And so what we're teaching the teachers in this is the power of the pause. Like before you respond, take a breath and then respond. And typically what comes out after the pause is so much better that comes out before the pause. Take a listen to the podcast, how we're using it at our center. We're using it few different ways. We are sharing it in our monthly professional development email that we send our teachers as a resource. Like we'll put a few different podcasts in there for them to listen to. Hey, when everyone listen to this podcast, if it is the Power of Pause, and say, I want you to listen to the Power of Pause podcast, and then I want you to come to the next staff meeting, whenever that is, with 2 ways you can implement that in your day-to-day work, in your job in the classroom. And so then you bring everyone back to the center, and you can do it a few different ways. I find that people more open up if it's in small groups. You can divide the group in half. You can divide them in 4, however you want to divide your team, and everyone share in that group what they took away from it. And then what other ways? What did they take away from listening to other people's takeaways? And then come together as a big group and share maybe the top 2 things that they took away, and everyone can just keep learning from each other. And when we create a collaborative environment, that's super helpful, right? It's one of the greatest ways to develop a team is through collaboration and mentorship. But I digress today because I saw that. I was thinking of that podcast this morning, and it is doing really well on the charts. And if you haven't listened to it yet, I think that you need to go check it out. All right, today I get asked quite a bit about how to delegate tasks and roles inside the office. And I have been working with a center who has finally got to a point where they can add an assistant director. And they're like, what? How do we know who does what? I'm going to go through a few different ways you can allocate the tasks in the office. And you have to know that this isn't permanent. You can always change things. But to start off or to relook at it, if you've been in the office for a million years with your assistant director and you're all doing the same things and you want to mix it up just for job satisfaction, you can do that to up-level somebody. There's so many different ways that you can utilize this for. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to identify all the responsibilities that you have. Now, If you've worked with us before or listened to these podcasts, I talk a lot about money, administration, and people, the success map of childcare. And so with your map, you can sit down and you can look at money tasks and write them all down. Like, what does the office need to do when it comes to money? That's like accepting tuition, tours, probably, expenses, purchasing, like all those things. Write down all those things. And then write down all of the administrative tasks you do, which are a lot, I know. That's all your licensing things, all the company things that you want to get done, via drills, observations, maybe not performance reviews because that would be in people. What else can we say? The daily schedule, scheduling hours, email, ordering lunches, paperwork, all the things. And then in your people tab, write that. What are all the things that you do there? Then I want you to take a step back from that, brainstorm all those things, and then look at it and say, do I want to add anything? Is there anything in there that I'm like, now that we have a second person, or if you already have two people and you just want to be more strategic about what you do and not just fly by the seat of your pants, add things that you want to see in there. Like I remember one time years and years ago, we had somebody at our center that was in the office and they just weren't doing the things that we wanted them to do. And finally I was like, said to my sister, have we told them that we want them in the classrooms like 30% of the time? Because that's what we had brought them on for. And we were both like, no. So we had to be more specific right there. Oh, I want you in the classrooms this much time. If that's for an assistant director or, I don't know, curriculum coordinator maybe needs to be in there, or behavior specialist. Really set forth all the responsibilities and tasks that you want done and lay it out there. And then look at them, and we're going to move now. Now we have this core responsibilities. Now let's look at the allocation based on strength. Who do we want working on these things? If one of my money tasks is to prepare the budget, I'm not going to ask the assistant director to do it. Clearly that's mine. I'm assessing like that's what I should do. But there could be other things on there that don't take that level of skill or introduce them a little bit to something. Like maybe some of the assistant director could take over scheduling, and that could be one big thing off your plate. And so look at what they're good at, what you could help develop them into, and then maybe other things you can share. Like, oh, we'll do staff training together and we'll do the staff meetings together. Allocate the assignments and the tasks based on that, and making sure that there's no overlap. Like you don't want to say, oh, we'll just deal with it when we get to it. Don't do that. Because when you do that, it turns into a nightmare and it either gets dropped or there's some miscommunication. And so once you have these tasks and you have assigned them to who you think should do what, and be really specific with the people in the office of what your expectations are. Like, I don't want to see you sitting in front of the computer all day. I want you out and about, or you need focused time, or whatever you want them, direction you want to give them. And then this third thing I want to talk about is using some tools and systems to help you stay organized. What can you use to manage all the projects that you have, or a to-do list? Do you have Google Docs, or do you use, like some people use Trello? I love Milano. It's milanote.com. And that is just like a project management system that's free that me and my team use. And we all have access to the master to-do list, so we can see exactly who's working on what and when and all the things. You might not need it at that level, but that is a super easy way to stay on top of all the tasks that you have. You can also, another tool that I like to use is the Monday morning meeting. And that is when you come together as a leadership team, the two of you or three of you or however many, and you talk about the week. What goals you have. You make sure that they're aligned with your vision and they're working on the things you want them to work on that will complete the tasks to get you into the position that you want the center in. Those are really helpful. If you're working with a new assistant director, like schedule progress check-ins, okay? Like midweek, maybe you recheck in and see if they need support on things. I think that's really helpful. Once you reallocate, if you're already been in practice and you're like, you know what, we need to mix things up. Let's shake it up. Or if you have a brand new assistant director and you're rolling out these new roles, make sure everything's documented. and to review them. Go for a month and see how it goes and reallocate, have a meeting and say, okay, are we on the right path? Do you have too much work, not enough work? Adjust things as you see needed and tell them that you'll take feedback anytime that they have it. Let's just recap on some of the things that we talked about. First thing was like documenting all the tasks and responsibilities, then assigning them to the right person based on skill set, looking at up-leveling skills on your team, what things interest them. Like, I'm never going to take filing. I'm just going to tell you that. If we're working together, I'm never taking filing. I don't know why I hate that task so much, but I do. Set expectations for them, right? And then to consider using tools. Like, could you use a online system, a document to keep you guys on the same page with your strategic goals and your plans? And then regular check-ins and evaluating how this allocation of tasks and duties is going so that everybody feels like they know what's happening and that they have input and that you guys can adjust it to make it work for you. I think it's extremely important once you do this that it's documented. All the job tasks, the responsibilities, and the expectations. And it's not really hard. Once you develop that core list of responsibilities that need to get done to operate your childcare center, put all those into ChatGPT. Ask it to write you a plan. Ask it to write you up. These are the assistant director roles. These are the director roles. Write up a job task list for us. Get it easy. Make it easy for you to go through. I hope today that you learned something about our podcast that can help your team and about how to split your tasks effectively, going with a 2-person office with assistant director and a director. And again, this is also great task to use if you have multiple childcare centers to help you keep the office streamlined and efficient. Hope you learned something. If you have a second, I'd love you to go rate the podcast and head to the show notes and you'll find that podcast in there for the Teacher's Lounge. Thanks for listening. Have an awesome week. Bye, everybody.